Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome back to the free-to-play review. So we have a lot to talk about today because there's a bunch of April 1st shenanigans going on right now. Of course, the main topic for today is the current summon pool going on right now. And for a while there, I was wondering if I was even going to talk about this, because if you haven't noticed, my pattern typically when it comes to summon pools is that I only talk about them if there is an air quotes free summon up for grabs. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense to free-to-play review something that is not free-to-play accessible. But nonetheless, we've got a couple of days left, and they finally released the tournament. In this case, that's going to be featuring the air quotes free summon, and it is quite tough, but if you can pull it off, you could and should be well ahead of your opponents. But we'll come back to that a little bit later. So this particular summon pool is the Orcs summon pool. So the headline champion is, of course, the faction unity champion for the Orcs, who's kind of okay. Obviously, he's an absolute menace when he's an enemy wave combatant, just because he's HP based. Therefore he's super tanky. Therefore he hits super hard. But when you use him, he's a bit more niche. He's not as strong, not as oppressive, and so you're kind of looking more towards niche content and or like siege content where you can really restrict your opponents in PvP. Aside from him, you do have just a random assortment of Orcs here, some of which are better than others. Obviously, Artak is great. He was given out for free, of course, but if you weren't playing back then, getting him is a really solid champion for like Spider progression, Ice Golem progression. He's still like the kind of king of Ice Golem hard and stuff like that. Krokad, Packmaster, of course, either one of those or both of them together are super strong. And then you have Tila Gormain, she's been buffed, or she was buffed maybe like 3 years ago now, and she's better than she was before, but she's definitely more of a kind of like a Hydra progression champion. You definitely outgrow her over time. You have Kreela Witcharm, who's on my wish list as far as niche champions for like that one rotation of the Cursed City versus Fire Knight, where she's like basically the only accessible or the only qualifying ally attacker, and I happen to not have her. And then a couple of underwhelming ones. What's her name? Zarguna, Matriarch Zarguna, really underwhelming champion. Bells the Reckoner's okay for like progression and Hydra once again. Nogdar, super fun to use, but just not really that meta, unfortunately. But he is fun to kind of manipulate HP and take himself out and kind of mess around with people. But I definitely have gone out of the habit of using him. But I digress. In terms of the epics, decent mix, couple of good ones, a couple of stinkers. The ones to highlight here is Argala, of course, one of the OG epics, decreased defense, triple hitter, good for restrictive content, epic only content. And then I've heard a recent shout out for her against Total Guard. I don't know if I would necessarily build up Zargala for that purpose, but triple hitter AoE is a rare ability to have. So if you want to run her in as super fast and break a bunch of Total Guard stacks, that technically is a way to do it. Duck the Pierced, arguably the better debuffer for the Orcs. Old Hermit Jorg, one of the best revivers for the faction. I know a lot of people love Tagore. I'm not a huge fan of Tagore. I don't like champions in general who waste their revivability when no one is dead, just because on auto it's just not as friendly, and you might need this and it won't be there, and etc. So he's still decent. He's better on manual. Tagore's better on manual, but I'm personally not a fan because I like to play the game on auto. Let me know if you disagree in the comment section down below. And then yeah, Ultimate Garlic here, not that amazing. Sandlash Reviver if you need a buff extender, but there's a lot of other epic options that can do it a bit better, and then the rest aren't really worth mentioning. In terms of the event itself, pretty standard stuff. This is effectively a sacred shard, meaning that you have a 6% chance to get a legendary, 94% chance to get an epic, and I always like to highlight this. 94% chance to get an epic means that most of the time you are going to walk away with an epic, so do not be surprised if that is not the case. It is the most likely outcome. 19 out of 20 times you open a Prism Shard, you are going to get an epic, so do not expect a legendary on any given one pool. But if you do happen to get one, then congratulations, you hit the 6% chance. The 6% chance is broken down into primarily, I guess you could think of it like cards in a deck. Most of the cards are the headline champion, but a few of the cards are split across all 8 of these legendaries here. So 0.5% chance that you'll get any one of these, but a 2% chance that you'll get this specific one, the headline champion. So much higher odds that the legendary you get, if you get one at all, will be the headline champion. Now let's talk about the air quotes free summon from the tournament. And this one is kind of what they tend to do around this time frame, where it's just kind of a silly tournament, but nonetheless it is a legitimate tournament, and it does take a lot of effort to try and do well in this one. So you have to get accessories from the Spider's Den, but only using uncommon champions. So this right out of the gate, I will say, is extremely niche. I would not go out there and build a bunch of uncommons because this is only a 2-day tournament. So if you happen to have some of the uncommons we'll talk about that are useful for the lower level stages of Spider, then by all means use them. I'm definitely using the ones that I have, as you can see here with my little bit of participation. But yeah, I just want to preface, this is a very, very niche, a very, very difficult tournament to partake in. But if you do have the resources to do so, you could get yourself a relatively easy win. So we're here on the first day, as you can see here, and I'm already in second place. I'm still working on using my energy for this, and I'll definitely go out to the 1400. We'll see how some of these guys who actually have gotten points, how they fare, how committed they are to getting all the way out there, and potentially I could walk away in first place and get myself some 6-star relentless gear, which I would not mind getting. But of course, the main target there being the air quotes free summon from the summon pool. As I've said during the last handful of these, I did relatively recently get a legendary from the summon pool, so I'm not expecting to get my next 1 in 20 shot anytime soon, but you never know. And so the more the more shots you take, the more likely it is to happen over time. And so definitely worth it in my opinion for myself. But I am also 5-year veteran endgame player who does happen to have some of the champions that work really well for this particular dungeon. And with that in mind, might as well jump into the dungeon and talk about it, just because I don't feel the need to have a separate dedicated video because this is so extremely niche and there's really not much detail to get into, unfortunately or fortunately, depending upon how you want to look at it. So for stuff like this, I wouldn't even bother with hard mode. I think that's extremely difficult, and it will be hard to keep your uncommon champions live if you even have any of them built on your account. They definitely have kind of fallen from the meta. Again, let me know in the comment section down below if you guys disagree, but I think that when you're starting a new account, you don't really have to rely on uncommons and rares as much as we did back in my day. There's a lot of entry-level promo codes that kind of help you get started with good epics, good legendaries, so you can kind of skip right to those, start working on that, developing your account. So you don't really need to rely on a bunch of uncommons like we did. But nonetheless, if you do have them, then they could work. So this is the type of stuff where you drop all the way down to the lower stages of normal and just kind of slowly grind your way through it. Everyone talks about stage 10 because there is a relatively high rate of uncommon 5-star gear that drops out of it. But the affinity could be a problem depending upon who you're using for this, but it is an honorable mention for that. Stage 11, 12, 13. 13 is what I'm running in the team. I'll show you a little bit later. And if you have like cracked out gear and stuff like that, maybe you can push into stage 16 and beyond, but that's kind of like I would say a really high level end game type of stuff going on there. So my stage 13 team, it is extremely straightforward. We've got a shield guard and an armiger. Shield guard I used to use a long time ago when I just did not have as many good AoE nukers, and specifically Spirit Affinity, so he's just kind of a legacy champion I've had. So I rebuilt him, we'll talk about that a little bit later, and put some new gear on him and just kind of sent him to kill the spiders. That's his job. That's his one job, but he also has decreased speed and weak version on the A1. Then Armiger, classic Armiger, turn meter control on the A1, and then the enemy max HP hit on the A2. So let's go ahead and talk or see this team in action. It takes about 2 minutes or so to get through it, but it's pretty straightforward. Armiger is just going to, without AI overrides, I might add that you don't really need to do that for this type of team. But yeah, boom, big AoE. He is in Merciless. You can see the decreased cooldowns proccing there. So and he also has a little bit of his masteries done, as we'll look at a little bit later. But essentially, he has one ability because he's an uncommon. So anytime the Merciless procs, as you can see there, back to back to back, or when the mastery procs, I think it's called Cycle of Violence, he'll just get, there's only one ability to cool down, so it'll be the AoE. So he just spams AoE and gets in more and more damage, AoE damage out there. And again, his job, primarily speaking, is to clear the table. So his job there, kill all the spiderlings whenever they spawn. He will always do it in the gear that he's built at. And then Armiger's job is to kind of slow down the spider a little bit, but more importantly, the enemy max HP damage. If we can eventually get the decreased speed from Shield Guard on the A1, that might make it a little bit smoother, but it's not really required for the success of the run. It does help. There you go. Finally got it to proc. It does help slow down the spider, though, of course, decrease speed. But yeah, we basically just rinse and repeat. There isn't much complexity to this team. Obviously, you could run this team with food alongside of them, uncommon food, I guess, to be more precise, to make sure you're completing the tournament and getting credit for it. But it is nonetheless a thought that you can put into that. There is no champion training, at least at the time of this recording, but there is a champion training tournament, or a champion training event that does start tomorrow. So it might make more sense to overlap those two tomorrow once both events are live, if your plan was to run some food alongside this tandem here. But yeah, more Merciless procs there, another AoE, back to back. And then Armiger is, nope, I think the spider is going to actually get another turn here, unfortunately. So she's going to heal up a little bit. Not a big deal. So this is like the worst case scenario where we didn't get decreased speed for a little bit too long. And so the spider was kind of keeping pace with us more so than being slowed down, but it doesn't matter. Eventually Shieldguard will get back to the AoE, and then he'll just kind of clear the table no matter how many spiderlings are alive, because he can always kill all of them whenever he gets his AoE off. And essentially, for anyone who doesn't know how Shield Guard works, he gets turn meter for each critical hit. So as long as there's a couple of spiderlings out there, he's going to get basically a back-to-back turn and go in and place the A1, or as we saw a little bit with the Merciless procs or the Cycle of Violence procs, he can get back-to-back AoEs because his AoE is on a 2-turn cooldown. So really quickly, let me run through the builds. It's not necessarily that you need to copy these builds, because these, like I said, these are uncommon. They're not in really, really amazing gear or anything like that. They're in gear that just suffices for the task at hand. So Armiger is just kind of in a random mix of stuff. We got some speed gear, some perception, one piece of stone skin, one piece of protection, one piece of feral. So it's like whatever, random pieces that kind of cobble together make a build. 30,000 on the HP, 2,700 on the defense, 220 on the speed, full crit rate, because you do need that to reduce turn meter on his A1, 200% crit damage, key is enemy max HP, of course, and then 355 on the accuracy. Way too high for these low level stages, but he is built just in case I need him for other things that require higher bits of accuracy. No relic, of course. He's an uncommon. He's not that important. He's booked, of course, because he's an uncommon. He has masteries because way back in the day, 5 years ago, Armiger was an essential part of some team at some point, and so he does have these masteries here. But again, you know, if you're using him level 50 for this, you don't really have to worry about the masteries. And then Shield Guard, I did put some new gear on him, at least gear that wasn't being used on him. So he is in the 4-piece Merciless set, so we did see that proccing a fair amount of the time. He's always been, or at least he's recently been, in the Immortal set, so I tried to keep that on him so he can just heal himself a little bit. I used to have him in Lifesteal, and that works well as well to heal him up if you're more concerned about him dying. But in this case, he's just consistently killing the spiderlings, so they never get a turn, so you never have to worry about the poisons or anything like that. Feral piece is just a bonus. Don't really need that much accuracy on him, again, for this low level of stages that we're farming. Total stats here, 31,000 on the HP, 4K on the defense, 209 on the speed, full crit rate, 238 on the crit damage, and then, like I said, we don't really care about the accuracy all that much. Yeah, once again, no relic. He's an uncommon. He's fully booked. He's an uncommon. This is the ability I'm talking about. This is on a 2-turn cooldown, but with any type of cooldown reduction proc, it'll go to this, so he gets back-to-back AoEs. Notably, we didn't have to see it this time, but if there were some situation where Spider did get a turn and put a poison on him, every turn he just cleanses himself on 1 render debuff, so that is kind of nice as well. And then he has a little bit of masteries. I farmed a little bit of the masteries this morning just to give him a little bit more damage, and mainly I just wanted Cycle of Violence there to potentially reduce the cooldown. But then I ended up putting him in a Merciless anyways, and then so it was a bit redundant. But yeah, more he's faster with every enemy he kills. He starts off obviously by killing a bunch of the spiderlings, so he just gets faster and faster throughout the fight. I guess up to 18 speed faster, and then just kind of keeps hammering out the damage. So a little bit of masteries there. Obviously, if we had if he was that important, War Master would be great, just because it would maximize his damage against the boss, because of course he is getting a lot of turns, but he's an uncommon. He's not really going to be used anywhere outside of the super niche content, and I have a lot more higher priority champions who need masteries that are well above the caliber of Shield Guard, unfortunately for him. Now, in terms of other champions who could be useful in this particular instance, again, it's not going to be a long list. There aren't that many good and or useful uncommons in the game. Kind of by design, they're meant to be food, not necessarily be used, and that's just kind of how the game is balanced. Let me focus first on just AoE damage. Obviously, we talked about Shield Guard. He does that job very, very well, and just having him gain the turn meter when he crits makes him kind of cycle through his turns really quickly, as we just saw. But honorable mention to Zephyr Sniper here, AoE on the A1. So if you do build her in a similar way, high defense, high crit damage, she can kind of spam her A1 and get a decent amount of damage out there, especially if you build her in some sort of retaliation set, avenging set, lifesteal plus retaliation or something like that. Anything to get her to counterattack so that she can heal herself whenever she counterattacks, and also just deal damage, which could kill where the spiderlings, and just kind of slowly but surely whittle your way through the entire fight. So honorable mention there. And then from the Lizardmen's, there's also Saurus here, who does have an AV on the A1 once again. This time he's more attack based, so it's a little bit harder to keep him alive, but you can kind of run the same strategy there with lifesteal, retaliation, or any kind of counterattacking, assuming he has some way to heal himself. And then of course he has a double hitter AoE on the A2. So AoE here, just spam your AoEs. Hopefully you kill the spiderlings repeatedly, and then you just whittle down the boss's HP slowly over time, ideally with War Master, but again, mastery's on an uncommon. You be the judge of whether or not that's worth it for you in your particular situation. In terms of turn meter suppression, we talked about Sacred Order, that being Armiger. From the High Elves, there is also Elfguard here, who on a 2-turn cooldown can decrease the target's turn meter by 50%. It's not 100%, but it is better than nothing, and it is on a relatively short cooldown, that being 2 turns, so she can kind of just spam that in conjunction with an Armiger or in substitute of an Armiger, depending upon who you have built on your account, so that can work as well. And then an honorable mention to Pit Fighter from the Barbarians, who on his A2 here, on a 3-turn cooldown, same thing, decreases the target's turn meter by 50%. So I just mentioned him because it's a worse cooldown, but if you are worried about affinity issues or you're trying to do a different stage and you want to control the turn meter, this is basically your best bet, unfortunately. But again, that's just the nature of the low level kits of uncommon champions. So yeah, like I said, this tournament is going to be extremely exclusive to people in my situation or similar situations who have the uncommons already built. I do not recommend going out of your way to build uncommons for this, unless you do want to take advantage of the champion training tournament that starts tomorrow. Build up an uncommon, get them to level 50 and or level 60. If you have nothing else to 6-star, that could be worth it, and just kind of grind as much as you can tomorrow to get this done. But at the same time, depending upon who you care about from the summon pool, that might not be worth it, because the Orcs is not really the strongest faction in the game. Obviously, Crocad, Packmaster are extremely powerful combo. Artak is good as well, but you may already have them just because of their fusion events and or their free events, and so it kind of depends. If you have those core 3, you may not care about the other 6, and so this really doesn't feel like it might be worth your while, but that is up to you to decide for yourself. This is probably one of the few times where I would actually not recommend participation, just again, depending upon your resources and how you want them allocated. But if the opportunity is there, you could get a potentially useful legendary or a duplicate of a potentially useful legendary, so that might be worth it. But yeah, generally speaking, I would say probably not worth it for most people to care at all about this particular summon pool. And then just as an added bonus, I did want to mention that because it is April Fool's, this is what they tend to do every year or so, but there is a mystery summon rush. So do not be fooled. Every single shard type is worth 1 point, so do not waste anything but your mystery shards, and all you have to do is pull 1,000 mystery shards and you get some energy, you get some gems, eternal soul coins, 4-star chicken, and most importantly, a legendary tome. So just spam through them in 10 to 20 minutes or so and you can get yourself a free legendary tome just for burning mystery shards. So yeah, that's always a fun event that they do every year, and they've officially updated the game, so the Demon Lord or Super Demon Lord Coalition event is starting tomorrow as well, so that'll be kind of interesting to see what all that entails and kind of work on that. But that's more discussion probably for this weekend's stream. We'll take a deeper dive into what all that has to show. But yeah, that is going to do it for today's free-to-play review of the Orc Summon Pool, plus some coverage of the uncommon spider tournament. Let me know in the comment section down below if you care at all about the summon pool. Do you have some uncommons on your account that were already built, and or do you plan to build them up after the champion training tournament starts tomorrow, or in spite of that, to go for the air quotes free summon in this case? As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel, and feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well, if and only if you're enjoying the content overall on this channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching and have a good one.